Well, hello there, my dear children of the apocalypse. How are we doing today? Welcome back to the 52 Weeks of Self-Improvement, and welcome to what I believe is a book that you absolutely have to read, and you have to start reading it today. It's Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker, and I've actually not gotten through the book. In fact, I'm barely halfway on page 156, and I just cannot fathom how much life-important information is in this book. Some of you might be able to recall the video I did on testosterone and how I mentioned that there's a collection of 3 things that I do that I ensure to keep my testosterone high. One of those things was 8 hours of sleep. And we live in a society today, we live in a state, especially gaming addicts, right? Those of you who are still playing video games and people like myself who used to do that in the past, we don't get 8 hours of sleep. We tend to run on 7, 6, sometimes even less hours of sleep because we think we'll just get it in later. When I started reading this book, I was expecting something along the lines of a doctor telling me that, it's kind of good if you get a little bit more sleep. What I didn't expect was that the numbers that were written in this book were going to send me into a real state of shock. Because it is shocking just how much of our life and our life deterioration has to do with sleep. I think the easiest way to describe this book is something I actually wrote in my notes. I've been starting taking notes on everything I read. So whenever I'm reading a book, what I'll do is I'll use Google Lens or the iPhone's built-in recognition software for text, and I'll take a picture of the page I'm reading, and I'll then take the text, the quote or the paragraph, and I'll import it into the program called Notion. And then I'll assign certain tags to it. I'll say, okay, this is a Stoic quote, this is a quote about leadership or about relationships. And I might even assign it a rating and say, okay, this is a quote that I really want to, come back to, or this is something that's just kind of good to have a reference to. And it allows me to then re-enter the mind of the book, the mind of myself as a reader when I was going through the book, and figure out what I can do to get more out of it. And the other thing I wrote down here in my Notion is that there are 4 biological drives: to eat, to drink, to fuck, and to sleep. Those are the 4 biological instincts we cannot do without. And I think what we've done is we've effectively, in the modern society, completely eradicated the desire that we have for sleep. Because there's this mindset that, it's 8 hours a day. And you do that for the rest of your life, and you spend 1/3 of your life sleeping. And it sounds like a bad thing. We make it sound like it's unappealing. We make it sound like it's something that we really don't have to do. And so what I find shocking is that, especially in the hustle mentality, the business world, you get a lot of these individuals who obviously they've got accolades, they've completed things, they've built multi-million-dollar companies, but they'll say, if you really want to be successful, you'll have to sleep less. You have to sacrifice sleep in order to get to where you want to be. Because if you only sleep 7 hours a day, that will give you an extra 7 hours a week. And they think that's the mentality I need. Now, I won't go into the details of what the book talks about. First of all, because I haven't read the whole thing. Second of all, because I'm not intelligent enough to even comprehend some of the words and brain functions that we go through, from the hippocampus to the amygdala and the other bits that it's beyond my knowledge base. But I think the way to sum it up is that our sleep contains 2 individual parts. You have the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement part of sleep, and the non-rapid eye movement sleep. And the difference is drastic because we need both of them. And they did a vast amount of testing where they would deprive people of one or deprive people of the other, or they'd give them a surplus of sleep and then try to figure out what happens. What happens to their memory? What happens to their ability to have a strong immune system? What happens to their testosterone? What happens to the way they behave? Is it safer to be drunk but having had a lot of sleep and driving a car? Or is it safer to be sober driving a car but being underslept? I think most of us know the answers. I think most of us, when you're going to be reading this book, you'll be thinking, I kind of knew this, but I don't think you quite know the extent. For example, the effects of a siesta. In Southern Europe, in Spain, Italy and Greece namely, there's this time after lunch where everything is closed. People just go and they take a nap. And when they did the testing, I think it was on 26,000 Greek people, what they found out was that by taking the siesta, they would increase the likelihood of reaching the age of 90 by 4 times. Think about that for a minute. You are 4 times more likely to reach the age of 90 by just doing the simplest thing in the world and taking a nap every day. What about physical performance? I've got a quote here that says, obtain anything less than 8 hours of sleep a night, and especially less than 6 hours a night, and the following happens. The time to physical exhaustion drops by 10 to 30%, and aerobic output is significantly reduced. Similar impairments are observed in the limb extension force, the vertical jump height, together with the decreases in the peak and sustained muscle strength. Add this to marked impairments in cardiovascular, metabolic, and respiratory capabilities that hamper the underslept body, including faster rates of lactic acid buildup, reduction in blood oxygen saturation, and converse increases in blood carbon dioxide, due to a part of a reduction in the amount of air that your lungs can expire. Even the ability of the body to cool itself down during physical exertion through sweating, a critical part of peak performance, is impaired by sleep loss. So again, what we have here is that in the realm of physicalities, when it comes to you trying to be an athlete, when it comes to you trying to get gains in the gym, or for me to be better performing on my bike, what I realize is that by sacrificing sleep, I'm actually sacrificing not just the performance, but the rest that comes with it, the actual gains that come with it. It's shocking. If you realize just how much better you would be, how much more efficient you would be by getting 8 hours of sleep consistently, never sacrificing it under no circumstance whatsoever. Not to mention the memory. In fact, this is something I learned myself. I realized this was happening when I was still studying in school, and I observed that I would have the best recollection of knowledge if I would study in the evening, take a nice sleep, and then just go through some of the notes in the morning. I realized that was something that worked for me, that I was able to retain much more information and recall much more information. And in fact, when doing the testing, they figured out that that's exactly what happens. They would even do this thing where they would give people a set of things to memorize, and then they would have 2 groups, and one group would go take a quick power nap, while the other group would would do something else or just wait around. And the result were drastic, because just a simple little sleep, there's something in our head that is created in such a way that the actual memories will get recycled and sort of embedded into our hardware, and you're just able to recall it much, much better. And that's one of the main reasons why I read books in the evening right before I go to bed. And I'm convinced that much more information actually stays within my head. Now, I'm not going to go and say that it's different for every person. I think there's some scientific baseline here which is described in the book. But obviously I know some people that just prefer to wake up in the morning and do their reading there. But again, we're all different. Figure out what works for yourself. And one of the things I found shocking is that the number of people that can survive on 5 hours of sleep or less without any impairment expressed in the percentage of the population, rounded to a whole number, is 0. You can't. But we're convinced that we can. I'll go to bed later today, and I'll still wake up early. I'll chug down a Monster or a Red Bull in the morning, and I'll get the work done and get some caffeine intake. And then these people, they get caffeine intake at like 6 p.m. And I think we vastly underestimate how long caffeine actually stays in the body, because what actually happens is when you try to go to bed, you're still completely discombobulated by the amount of caffeine that still hasn't been processed. And then your next night is now impaired, which means you're going to need even more sugar, even more coffee, even more of these boosts in order to get yourself through to the next day. And you'll do this until you get to the weekend, because most people tend to live for the weekend. I'm going to talk about this in a completely different video, but you get to the weekend and now it's like, oh, now I've got time, now I can sleep in. I can sleep until 12, I can sleep until noon, I can sleep until lunch. But usually you don't, because it's Friday night and you go out partying with your friends, and then you do the same thing on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday, maybe you sleep in a little bit longer. But even that won't work, because Sunday evening will roll around, you'll realize you haven't done anything, you haven't cleaned, you haven't read any books, you haven't done any exercises, you're still not feeling good, your head might be hurting, and so you'll just repeat the process the morning next. And that Monday through Friday rolls around, and you just do the same thing over and over again for 52 weeks, and before you know it, it's Christmas Eve, it's New Year's Eve, and then you just say, oh, new year, new me. And nothing ever changes. Now, I'm currently entering the part of the book which is spending a lot of time talking about emotions and how we enter a state of almost a bipolar disorder purely because of the lack of sleep. And sometimes we could even be diagnosed with having some kind of emotional disbalance or depression, when really what could be the underlying source is just simply the lack of sleep. Because when you're sleep deprived, you're also irritated. When you're sleep deprived, you don't want to be around. When you wake up in the morning and you just, I need that cup of coffee, right? You can't talk to anybody else. I think if you're one of those people that at any given point of time require something after waking up to not be cranky, you might have a problem. Because I think your body is trying to tell you something. Your body is trying to tell you that you're lacking a essence which your body absolutely requires, and it's sleep. This book, like I said, is one of the books that I really, from the bottom of my heart, I was so blown away by it, and I'm reading it very slowly on purpose. Because I feel like if I munched through it in a weekend, what would happen is that a lot of that information would just fly over my head. A lot of the quotes I would just not remember. A lot of the statistical facts I will not remember. And I'd rather read the book slowly and get as much information as I can, spread out across several months perhaps, and use it as a reminder that I'm sleep deprived. In fact, just in the last 5 days, I have pulled many semi-all-nighters where I would go to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning. And it's in those moments where I say, okay, tomorrow evening, you're going to take this book out, you're going to read it just a couple of pages. Even just 5 pages is enough to get me back into the state of mind. Sleep is important, don't neglect it. And the very next morning, I feel way better about myself. So if you can, get yourself this book, if it's on Kindle, if it's a physical form, as soon as possible, get reading, get stuck into it, because it will change your life. And in the next video, what we're going to talk about is another thing that, in conjunction with sleep, helped me change completely the way that I view the experience of getting shut-eye, laying for 8 hours every single day, and entering a very beautiful but a very illustrious world of dreams. Until that time, take care and safe flying.